What if I told you there's a real documented fact that stayed buried for over a century? Not because it was false, but because revealing it too early would have changed the course of society? Not a myth, not a rumor. A verified reality quietly archived, ignored, and fragmented across reports most people never read. For 100 years, this fact sat in plain sight while the world built systems, beliefs, and decisions on an incomplete picture. Tonight, we're breaking down what this hidden truth really was, why it stayed buried for so long, and how modern tools, including artificial intelligence, finally stitch the pieces together. Once you see how deep this goes, it's impossible to unsee. Before we dig deeper, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who loves uncovering hidden history, and subscribe to FactVex. What you're about to hear isn't just about the past. It explains why certain truths only surface when the world is finally ready to handle them. 1. The fact that was never truly lost. This fact was never erased from history. It was fragmented. Pieces of it existed in technical papers, early scientific journals, and government records going back more than 100 years. On their own, those fragments appeared harmless, incomplete, and unrelated. That was the key. No single document revealed the full truth. Artificial intelligence later made it possible to cross-reference these scattered records at scale, revealing patterns humans never connected because the information was never meant to be read together. The truth didn't vanish. It was diluted across time, institutions, and disciplines. Dilution is more effective than deletion because it prevents recognition without attracting attention. Why it was buried instead of denied, the most dangerous aspect of this fact was not controversy, it was timing. Early exposure would have destabilized economies, undermined trust in institutions, and disrupted long-term planning frameworks that societies depended on. Denial would have drawn attention, so omission was chosen instead. Artificial intelligence analysis of historical communication patterns shows consistent avoidance rather than contradiction. Officials didn't lie. They redirected focus. Certain data was reported without context. Other data was quietly archived. Silence allowed systems to function while avoiding panic. How a century of assumptions took root. While the full truth remained hidden, simplified explanations filled the gap. Over decades, these explanations hardened into accepted knowledge. They were taught in schools, repeated in media, and reinforced through policy until they felt undeniable. Artificial intelligence later revealed how repetition creates belief even when information is incomplete. Once an idea becomes foundational, questioning it feels destabilizing. Generations grew up assuming these explanations were final rather than provisional. This is how assumptions take root, not through deception but through familiarity. The role of institutions in keeping it quiet. Institutions didn't conspire to hide this fact. They aligned unknowingly around the same incomplete framework. Each institution relied on others to supply context that never arrived. Education taught simplified models, media reinforced them, policy operated within their boundaries. Artificial intelligence later showed how consistency across systems maintained the same gaps without deliberate coordination. No meetings were required. The system self-reinforced. Once a narrative becomes standard, deviation feels unnecessary and risky. Researchers who noticed anomalies lacked proof at scale. Administrators relied on precedent. The result wasn't secrecy, it was structural silence. Each institution believed it was telling the truth, just not the whole truth. Why scientists knew, but didn't push. Many scientists suspected something deeper for decades, but lacked the tools to prove it decisively. Without large data sets or cross-disciplinary visibility, early warnings sounded speculative. Artificial intelligence later revealed how isolated observations shared a common structure, something individual researchers couldn't confirm alone. Pushing the idea earlier would have risked reputations without changing outcomes. Scientific careers depend on evidence, not intuition. Silence wasn't fear, it was realism. Researchers documented anomalies carefully, waiting for technology to catch up. When artificial intelligence finally allowed pattern recognition at scale, suspicion turned into confirmation. What artificial intelligence finally connected? Artificial intelligence reviewed a century of data across fields humans rarely connected. Geological records, economic trends, ecological studies, infrastructure data, and demographic shifts suddenly aligned. Patterns repeated where coincidence had been assumed. Artificial intelligence exposed structural relationships hidden by disciplinary silos. This wasn't interpretation, it was correlation at scale. Once connected, the hidden fact stopped looking abstract and started looking inevitable. Why? It could only be exposed. Judd. This fact did not become true recently. It became observable. Systems grew complex enough to expose their own limits. Artificial intelligence matured enough to analyze them. A century ago, data was sparse, slow, and isolated. Today, scale compresses time. Patterns that once took generations to detect now surface within decades. Timing determined exposure, not morality. The world wasn't ready earlier, not intellectually, technologically, or structurally. Revealing the fact prematurely would have generated confusion rather than understanding. Now, conditions align. The public reaction wasn't shock, it was recognition. When elements of this fact surfaced publicly, panic didn't follow. Artificial intelligence sentiment analysis showed something else: recognition. People felt clarity, not fear. The information explained contradictions they'd sensed but couldn't articulate. That response matters. Shocking facts create chaos. True facts create understanding. The reaction suggested this truth had been subconsciously felt for years. Exposure didn't dismantle belief, it reorganized it. This changes our view of history. History often frames progress as ignorance replaced by knowledge. This fact shows a more complex pattern: restraint replaced by readiness. Artificial intelligence reframed the past, revealing that delay doesn't always equal deception. Sometimes it equals immaturity of tools or understanding. That perspective doesn't excuse omission, but it explains it. Understanding history through this lens changes how responsibility is assigned. The past wasn't blind, it was constrained. Knowledge existed but couldn't be assembled meaningfully. Artificial intelligence didn't rewrite history. It connected it. Once patterns were visible, events made sense retroactively. The long-term impact no one talks about. Even now, the truth isn't dramatic, it's operational. Artificial intelligence models quietly updated assumptions. Planning frameworks shifted, risk assessments changed, behavior adapted without announcements. This is how real change happens. The truth didn't explode into headlines, it integrated into systems. People rarely notice foundational shifts when they occur gradually. That subtlety makes the impact deeper. Once embedded, the truth influences decisions invisibly. This won't be the last time. As systems grow more complex, more buried facts will surface. Artificial intelligence ensures fragmentation cannot last indefinitely. Data accumulates, patterns emerge, truth gains gravity. It pulls itself together eventually. What stayed hidden for a century won't stay hidden forever in a connected world. Future revelations may not feel shocking, they'll feel overdue. Artificial intelligence compresses discovery timelines dramatically. What this means for you. The lesson of this hidden fact isn't distrust, it's awareness. Truth isn't always denied, sometimes it's delayed until understanding matures. Artificial intelligence accelerates that maturation. For you, this means questioning completeness, not honesty. Silence doesn't always mean safety. Confidence doesn't always mean certainty. Once you accept that, you approach information differently. You listen for gaps, not just statements. You remain flexible, not cynical. Awareness doesn't reject authority, it refines it. Hidden facts will continue to emerge, not because the world is dishonest, but because understanding evolves. When you grasp that, history feels less deceptive and more human. That perspective doesn't weaken trust, it strengthens judgment. And judgment is what allows people to navigate complexity without falling into fear or blind belief. If this story stayed with you, that's not paranoia, it's perspective adjusting. Some truths don't disappear, they wait. For 100 years, this fact sat quietly beneath explanations that felt complete but weren't. At FactVex, the goal isn't to tear down trust, it's to sharpen understanding. The past makes more sense when you realize how much timing matters in truth. Thanks for watching until the end and staying open to ideas that challenge comfortable narratives. Stay curious, stay patient, and remember, when something finally comes to light after decades of silence, it's usually because the world is at last ready to hear it.